My life took a dramatic swing toward the fantastical 2 weeks ago. I was significantly pregnant with my first child, a daughter we named May, when I attended my sister-in-law Anna's wedding. The day was supposed to be about Anna and her fiancé, Jonah, but my own mother-in-law, Rachel, swiftly turned it into a nightmare. Let me take a step back. Rick, my husband, and I get along well with his sisters, Emma and Anna. We've always gotten along, and they're both younger than him. Rachel, however, is another matter. She is a quintessential control freak who demands that everything happen her way. I usually avoid it because it might be draining. Anna was really supportive when Rick and I learned I was expecting. To ensure I wouldn't miss the wedding, she even offered to postpone it. That didn't happen, of course, but I was very grateful for her understanding. Out-of-town resident Emma was likewise overjoyed for us and kept in touch during my pregnancy. However, Rachel was irritated that her plans for Anna's special day were being interfered with by my pregnancy. Her passive-aggressive conduct was difficult to ignore, despite my best efforts. Fast forward to the day of the wedding. I was big, uneasy, and thought I might faint at any second. However, Anna urged that I attend, and I didn't want to disappoint her. I put up my best front and faced the glances and whispers that accompanied being a pregnant mother with a large baby. I became ill just before the ceremony. In the hopes that a change of scenery might be beneficial, I excused myself and walked upstairs. I had no idea that Rachel had followed me. It happened as I was heading to the restroom. My water broke. I was frantic. I had not anticipated my daughter's arrival at this time or location. In a desperate moment, I gave Rachel my phone and begged her to call Rick when I saw her. She locked me in the bathroom, though, rather than offering assistance. She stated Rick could wait until after the ceremony and that she didn't want me to steal Anna's spotlight. I was shocked to hear it. I yelled till my voice was hoarse, beat on the door and begged her, but no one listened. No one was paying attention to the drama taking on in the bathroom because they were all downstairs. I was so scared and tired that I finally fainted. The next memory I have is of waking up in the hospital and crying with Rick by my side. I thought the worst, but then I saw the nurse enter holding a gorgeous newborn girl. I felt a wave of relief. Rick explained that Rachel had admitted to locking me in the bathroom when he discovered me asleep. He had good reason to be angry. He promised me that he would charge his own mother with putting our lives in risk. Soon later, Anna and Emma showed up, still dressed for their wedding. Anna was delighted as she told me that the greatest wedding present she could have hoped for was May's birth. I was feeling quite emotional. I felt loved and supported despite the horror I had just experienced. However, the ordeal was far from done. Rachel was wanting to see her granddaughter outside the hospital room. I declined. She had shown herself to be unstable and dangerous. Rick informed me about his encounter with Rachel when we were eventually released from the hospital and returned home. She was no longer welcome in our life, especially May's, as he had made plain. Additionally, he told her that he would stop providing for her financially. Rachel's answer was an unsettling combination of manipulation and self-pity. She expressed concern that May would take her place in her children's lives and said she was being punished for just being a mother. She was obviously in a lot of trouble. When Rachel arrived at our house in the middle of the night a week later, she pounded on the door and insisted on seeing May. Before she departed, Rick had to threaten to contact the police. Her actual intentions were exposed when she sent us a string of insane texts the next day. She said that she despised the fact that we were all content and together, and felt intimidated by May's presence. She had hoped that my pregnancy would lead to jealousy and confrontation, but it had the opposite effect. I got shivers reading those messages. It was unbelievable to me that a 50-year-old woman was competing against a newborn. It was frightening and pitiful. Anna and Emma were equally worried, and we passed the messages on to them. They recommended that Rachel seek professional assistance since they thought she might be having a mental breakdown, and that's the current situation. To keep May and ourselves safe, we're moving forward with a restraining order against Rachel. I will not interfere with Emma's decision to take her to visit a therapist. I've had enough of her destructive behavior. The entire event has been an emotional roller coaster. In addition to being immensely thankful for my daughter's good health and my husband and his sister's constant support, I'm still dealing with the trauma of being locked in that bathroom. I hope this is the end of this story. All I want is to put this nightmare behind me and concentrate on being a mother. The weeks after May was born were a haze. I hardly had time to take it all in between overcoming the difficulties of new parenthood and recuperating from the traumatic delivery. Being a rock, Rick took on as much as he could so that I could concentrate on May and myself. He was wonderful with her. He rocked her to sleep, changed her diapers, and gave her the tender, affectionate looks that only a devoted father can provide. Jonah and Anna were also of great assistance. They lived close by and would frequently stop over to cook meals, bring groceries, or simply hold May while I took a much-needed shower or snooze. We would even giggle about how May had outdone Anna on her wedding day when she brought over her wedding pictures. It served as a useful diversion from the more sinister ideas that were gnawing at the back of my mind. Bless her heart, Emma traveled from all across the nation to provide a hand for a few weeks. She and May clicked right away, and I was happy to observe their growing relationship. It was refreshing to have her there, a reminder that despite the experience with Rachel, there was still good in the world. However, Rachel's actions cast a long shadow. I kept thinking about how close we had come to losing May every time I looked at her. I had a great deal of bitterness and hate toward Rachel. I found it incomprehensible that someone could be so self-centered and harsh, especially to their own family. At first, Rick was determined to file charges, but I persuaded him to drop the matter. I didn't want to prolong the drama because we already had enough to deal with a newborn. Furthermore, I was aware that Rachel had already experienced the repercussions of her acts, even in the absence of judicial action. She was now facing the possibility of an isolated and lonely future after alienating her kids and losing their respect and trust. In the hopes that it would provide some closure, we told Rachel about our choice. However, her response was not at all what we had anticipated. Rather than regret or appreciation, she appeared almost irritated. It seemed as though she was entitled to our pardon and that her behavior was somehow acceptable. I realized then that Rachel would never say sorry. She would never accept responsibility for her actions. She was too preoccupied with her own warped worldview in which we were the bad guys and she was the victim. It was a heartbreaking and freeing epiphany. It was liberating because I was no longer burdened with the expectation of an apology or the hope that she would ever realize the suffering she had caused. It was devastating since it meant that there was no longer any possibility of a reunion and that the relationship was forever ruined. A tiny part of me still felt terrible for her, in spite of everything. The loneliness and remorse she must be experiencing are beyond my comprehension. However, I was also aware that sympathy wouldn't make a difference. Now that Rachel had made her decisions, she had to deal with the fallout. We were more determined than ever to shield May from Rachel's destructive influence. We communicated with her as little as possible and made it plain that she was not wanted in either May's life or our home. It wasn't simple. I occasionally felt bad and questioned whether we were being too severe. However, the guilt would fade as I recalled the helplessness and terror I experienced in that restroom. May was entitled to a secure and affectionate upbringing, free from the turmoil and manipulation that Rachel brought with her.
We concentrated on establishing our own small family, giving May a safe haven of love and security, documenting all of her smiles and giggles, and showing her the warmth and love Rachel had denied her. And we prospered just as May did. We discovered how to communicate honestly and openly, to rely on one another, and to value the priceless gift of family.
By unintentionally drawing us closer together, Rachel's actions had reinforced our relationship and served as a reminder of what really counted. Even though the future was still unknown, we were prepared to tackle it as a family. All that mattered was that we had each other and May. With May, life was a blur of happiness and tiredness. With feedings, changing diapers, and the endless, amazing battle of keeping a little being alive and growing, the days blended together. Rick and I were exhausted yet excited, using a combination of instinct and sheer willpower to navigate the unknown world of parenthood. Our small house felt peaceful in spite of the mayhem. We had established a haven where laughing and love were paramount. Our existence revolved around May, whose contagious laughter and gummy smiles chased away any last vestiges of the past. However, like a stubborn pest in a well-kept garden, the past had a way of resurfacing. Our family's fabric was ripped apart by Rachel's absence, which was always there. Her deafening quiet served as a clear reminder of the harm she had caused. During those first few months, Anna and Emma were our lifelines. They were always available to help, to offer words of support, or just to listen without passing judgment. They served as a comfort to our broken souls and a reminder that we were not traveling this path alone. Ever the optimist, Anna attempted to see the positive side of things. Even if Rachel's actions were incorrect, she thought they were motivated by love, albeit a perverted and possessive one. One day, she hoped, her mother will realize her mistake and ask for forgiveness. Emma was less forgiving because she was more realistic. She was aware that change was improbable because she had personally witnessed Rachel's damaging patterns of conduct. However, she also acknowledged the value of family and urged us to keep in touch, even if it was little, for Rick and Anna's benefit. We had to balance our want to preserve some sort of family unity with our need for healing. We periodically provided Rachel brief, impersonal, emotionally weightless updates on May's growth. By keeping her updated, we intended to shield ourselves from her poison and stop her from having any more outbursts. However, Rachel's answers were inconsistent and unnerving. She would alternate between gushing about May, calling her her precious granddaughter, and accusing her of being abandoned and neglected. The delicate serenity we had laboriously cultivated was pierced by her remarks, which were like daggers. We acquired the ability to interpret her well-constructed statements and to read between the lines. We were aware of the deceptive strategies, guilt trips, and covert attempts to reclaim authority, and we became more determined as each message went by. We wouldn't play along with her. We refused to let her control our lives or taint our joy. We had made the decision to follow our own route, one that was marked by limits, love, and respect, and at all costs, we would not stray from it. We were filled with hope as May's first birthday drew near. Finally, the ominous clouds that had loomed over us for so long were starting to lift. We had survived the storm and come out stronger and closer than before. Rachel continued to exist as a ghost from the past that continued to haunt our present, but she no longer had as much control over us. With the love and support of those who really mattered, we had learned to fill the vacuum left by her absence. And we knew we had made the correct choice when we saw May's eyes light up with delight and awe as she took her first shaky steps. We had selected May, we had selected one another, and we had selected a future unencumbered by the constraints of the past. May had a very happy first birthday. To commemorate our little ray of sunshine, we invited close friends and family to our house for a small party. Laughter, the smell of freshly made cake, and the vibrant jumble of balloons and streamers filled the house. Wearing a pretty pink frock, May was the life of the party. Her plump cheeks flushed with delight as she ripped into her gifts. It was an ideal day, demonstrating our small family's love and tenacity. The warmth and happiness of the present momentarily overshadowed Rachel's shadow. However, the break was brief. A letter arrived a few days later, written in Rachel's unsteady handwriting and addressed to May. When I saw the familiar script, the same script that had earlier made me feel dread, my heart fell. Rick and I looked at each other anxiously. We had thought Rachel had finally moved on and come to terms with being cut off from our lives. However, that hope was dashed by this letter and its unannounced interference with our tranquil existence. I unfolded the letter and opened the envelope with shaking hands. It was an incoherent, meandering message that was laced with threats and self-pity. Rachel bemoaned her loneliness and accused us of denying her the role she deserved as a grandma and of inciting her children against her. The only person who could really understand her, she said, was May, and she needed her. I will not be ignored. I will not be denied my granddaughter. You will regret this, was the letter's final, terrifying warning. I felt a rush of horror come over me. Rachel's words hung over us like a horrible omen, a curse. I had an instinctive desire to keep May safe, to keep her safe from the poison that came from those scrawled words. We got in touch with Anna and Emma right away, telling them what was in the letter and how worried we were. Recognizing the growing urgency in their mother's voice, they were similarly concerned. Ever the sensible one, Emma recommended that we get legal counsel. She was concerned that Rachel's actions were becoming more erratic and that we should take safety measures to keep May and ourselves safe. We reluctantly consented. After speaking with an attorney, we were instructed to keep track of any additional correspondence from Rachel and to think about requesting a restraining order in the event that her behavior worsened. It served as a sad reminder that Rachel's shadow still hung over our lives and that the past was not really behind us. The weeks that followed were stressful. We were always on high alert, watching over our shoulders to see what Rachel would do next. We strengthened our locks, placed security cameras throughout our house, and alternated between staying up late at night to listen for any unusual noises. May kept on thriving, unaware of the underlying tension. She was an intelligent, inquisitive child who was lively and full of laughs. She served as a reminder of what we were fighting for, an array of hope amidst the approaching storm. However, the fear was always present, lingering beneath the surface and clouding our joy. We were aware that Rachel was observing and waited for a chance to attack. And we were aware that we needed to be ready for the coming conflict. We weren't prepared for the conflict to occur. I was wheeling May in her stroller around the park on a cool autumn afternoon when someone stepped out of the shadows. The steely glare in her eyes and the usual bent posture made my heart race in my chest. Rachel was the one. Her face was marked with a mix of defiance and desperation as she slowly made her way toward us. She cried out, "I just want to see my granddaughter," her voice breaking with grief. "I won't hurt her, I promise." Her comments, however, seemed empty. I could see the hatred that had festered for so long, the rage that was bubbling beneath the surface. I was aware that I would be endangering my kid if I allowed her to approach May. "No, Rachel," I answered firmly, a little shaky in my voice. "You're not welcome here. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." Rachel's lips curled into a sneer as her eyes narrowed. "You think you can keep me away from my own flesh and blood?" she yelled. "You're wrong. I'll get to her, one way or another." A shiver went through my body. She meant it, and I knew it. It was not appropriate to treat Rachel lightly. She was backed into a corner, poised to strike out like a wounded animal. With my pulse thumping in my ears, I swiftly turned the stroller around and rushed off. Rachel's presence was like a great weight on my shoulders, and I could feel her gaze burning into my back. I called Rick as soon as we arrived home to let him know what had transpired. He was so angry that his voice was trembling. He said, "That's it," in a resolute tone. "We're getting a restraining order. I won't let her terrorize us anymore." We appeared in court the following day and requested a restraining order against Rachel. The judge immediately granted our request after hearing our testimony and examining the supporting documentation. Rachel was forbidden from approaching us or May within a specific radius, and she would be arrested if she did so. The victory was bittersweet. We were glad to have legal protection, but we were also deeply saddened by the shattered family bonds and the irreversible harm Rachel had inflicted. However, we were certain that we had made the proper choice. Our first concern was keeping May safe, and we would stop at nothing to keep her safe. Our lives gradually returned to normal in the months that followed. A fresh sense of calm and assurance took the place of the fear and anxiety that had afflicted us for so long. May was growing, her laughter bringing happiness into our house. She served as a continual reminder of the love and tenacity that had seen us through our most trying moments. We continued to be watchful, ever conscious of Rachel's possible threat. However, we resisted allowing her to dictate how we lived. We concentrated on creating a joyful and healthy future for May, one that was full of love, joy, and the steadfast support of those who really mattered. I was watching May play in the backyard one day when a hawk flew overhead, its wings spread wide against the azure sky. I pictured Rachel, her soul bound to the ground, burdened by her own hatred and bitterness, and I understood that we were at last free. The darkness had vanished as we soared in the direction of a more brilliant horizon. We had opted for family over the poison of the past, hope over despair, and love over fear. I realized then that we were really free. This concludes my tale. It is a tale of loss and redemption, of heartache and recovery. It serves as a reminder that love can triumph even in the most trying circumstances, and that family is characterized by ties of devotion, empathy, and everlasting support rather than blood. One day, I hope to tell May this story so she can understand our mistakes, accept forgiveness, and recognize the resilience of the human spirit. Story 2. As I went back over Alex's work, my heart hammered in my chest. A paternity test. With Lila? Was he genuinely serious? "She doesn't look like me," he replied, as if that were some kind of solid proof. Let me back up a bit. It seemed like a slap in the face. Alex and I had spent a few years together and things were good, or so I thought. The twins, Luke and Lila, thrill us. But Alex began altering as my pregnancy developed. He grew aloof, always working late, constantly looking for ways to be away from me. He dropped the bomb then, 6 months pregnant. He was walking away, just like that. He seldom bothered to stay around for the birth of his own children. I was heartbroken, but I had to be tough. 2 babies were born to me en route. Of course, Luke was the spitting image of Alex, but Lila had enormous brown eyes, darker hair, and a dusting of lovely freckles across her nose. She really resembled my granny really closely. Though it never seemed to me that it would be a problem, apparently Alex and his new bride Fiona had a major one. Fiona, the woman he left for. From day one, she has been a thorn in my side, attempting to fit into my children's life and behave like their mother. Fortunately, the children see right through her. To her dismay, they refuse to call her Mama. So here I am 5 years later handling this paternity test absurdity. Inspired by Fiona, Alex is convinced Lila isn't his, and I cheated on him. Unbelievable. The thing that truly gets me is that this whole issue seems to be about money. He was there, well, not physically at the delivery, but we were married when she was born and his name is on the birth certificate. He has always paid child support, but I guess it was more to keep from conflict than out of any kind of obligation. But lately, alleging financial difficulty, he has been trying to cut the quantity. Correct, indeed. I got out about this whole paternity test plan from his sister Maggie. Maybe if he and Fiona weren't continually flying out on costly vacations and buying luxury clothes, he wouldn't be so struggling. She informed me Alex and Fiona were circulating stories, and he intended to cease paying child support should the test show Lila wasn't his. She is the only member of his family still in constant communication with me. Maggie also said that they were once more facing financial difficulties, which helped to explain Alex's skipping of his weekends with the kids. He said it was related to work, but I knew otherwise. Alex's justification was ridiculous when I confronted him. Lila doesn't look like you or me, he said. I tried to explain that not every child is a carbon copy of their parents and that genes are complicated. He didn't care even when I brought up my grandmother and how Lila looked like her. He insisted I had cheated, and I told him straight out he would have to bring me before court if he wanted a paternity test. I intended not to be bullied into anything. I wasn't going for his attempt to play the "I can't afford court" card. Then he did something absolutely horrible. Furious about how I had misled him and demanding he pay for another man's child, he went to Facebook. I had created the birth certificate, he even claimed. The man is mentally ill. Not even at the hospital was he present when Lila was born. As we were still married, his name appeared on the certificate automatically. Of course, his Facebook rants drew all kinds of comments from his equally naive pals. One even messaged me suggesting I should just have the paternity test to clear my name and ease Alex's problems. Unbelievably, I started to ignore his calls. He had to converse via text or email if he wanted to. I could record anything from there. I doubt his not twisting my statements is true. After years of coping with his manipulative conduct, I have learned my lesson. Deep down, I realize this is not even about Lila. That relates to money. With him, always revolves around money. I'm so tired of Fiona possibly whispering in his ear, asking him to stop paying child support and cut his losses. He left me while I was pregnant, hardly sees the children, and now he is trying to change history by asserting one of them isn't his. It is pitiful. He is, however, getting another thing coming if he believes I would roll over and let him get away with it. On this, court or not, I'll fight him. I won't allow Fiona or him to push me about. Yes, that's where things stand. They can disseminate all the lies they wish, but I know the truth, and deep down, Alex also knows. I'm waiting for him to either bring me before court or back off. To be honest, I'm rather hoping for the later. All right, deep breath. Let's see him attempt to clarify this entire mess before a judge. Alex chose to escalate just when I felt the paternity test drama was the height of his craziness. Starting softly with little barbs on social media, things only people close to us would understand, he and Fiona launched a full-scale smear campaign against me instead of cooling down and, acting like a reasonable adult. But it turned rapidly more intense. Not just online, but also within the family, he began dragging my name over the mud. One day I received a call from his dad, Phil. Now, Phil has always been polite to me, even following the divorce. He never let Alex's turmoil sour his relationship with the children. He's quite good with them. So I thought his call was simply a regular check-in. Boy, was I mistaken. He was virtually screaming, enraged over the lies Alex had been disseminating. Alex apparently had been telling everyone I had been cheating on him during our 2 years of marriage. 2 years instead, not only with some arbitrary man, but also with Steve, my old colleague. First of all, Steve is wed with children. We were merely colleagues, hardly even spoke outside of the office. Second, Alex was the one leaving. Though Phil realized it was ridiculous, the harm was done with this whole cheating allegation. Alex had contaminated Phil's side of the family's mentality as well. I had to suddenly do damage management with the in-laws, who were now challenging my side of the narrative. People's belief of the worst when they are not personally involved is astonishingly fast. Then there was Fiona, feeding the fires, supporting every word Alex said, acting like she'd been around since the dawn of time. Some of them even reached out, claiming to be worried, but actually simply hunting for gossip. She hates me, I understand, but this was a whole new degree of petty behavior. She even told everyone I had imprisoned Alex by getting pregnant, as though I had scheduled him to stroll out on me during my pregnancy. To make matters worse, Alex started posting cryptic comments on Facebook, the kind where he doesn't name names but everyone knows who he's talking about. In her warped mind, I guess it made sense to blame me for everything. Some people are finally getting exposed for who they really are, sort of thing. His response to remarks would be, "You'll see soon enough," along with lots of winky face emojis. "You should really just get the paternity test," Alex's friend, who I hardly know, messaged me. "You should really just get the paternity test," he added. "It'll shut everyone down." As if it were that simple. It concerned the principle of the thing, not only the test. Alex's life isn't turning out the way he desires, hence he cannot merely accuse me of cheating. I owe nothing to him, and I most definitely owe Fiona peace of mind. But here's where things really went quite wild. Alex stopped at the demands for the paternity test and the internet slander. He chose to involve the children. Not unusual, he missed his planned weekend visit. He had been flaking a lot lately. I was stunned when I phoned to find out what was happening, but he actually had the guts to tell me, "I'm not taking Lila until you prove she's mine." Because of whatever absurd concept he had entered into his head, he was punishing our daughter. He seemed unconcerned when I informed him, "You don't get to pick and choose which kids you take based on your mood." I lost it. He doubled down, declaring he wouldn't accept Lila until the test was over. "Fine," I replied. "If you don't want to be a dad to Lila, you don't get to be a dad to Luke either. I'm not playing these games. I'm not letting him mess with their heads, making them feel like they were only worthy of love if they met some arbitrary standard he'd set." Alex didn't take me seriously. If he were to be in their life, he had to be in both of their life. He hung up, laughing it off. When I phoned Phil once more to explain what had transpired, he was enraged with Alex, as was natural. He promised to chat to him, but I knew not much would change. The worst thing was that Luke started asking questions. Alex is stubborn. Once Fiona has an idea in his head, he loses reason. Though he is just 5, children have great perception. When Alex vanished, he sensed something was wrong. He asked why Daddy didn't want to visit them, and I had to try to explain it in a manner that wouldn't make Alex sound as though he was deserting them. "Though we will see him soon, Daddy was busy," I reminded him. Luke looked unconvinced, and that made me loathe Alex even more, as I could already see the long-term harm this may do on the children. All I ever wanted was for children to have a good relationship with their dad. He was the one screwing it off because of his ego. Lila, mercifully, is still too young to grasp, but I know the day will come when she questions why her dad behaved this way. To her, what should I say? Because he believed she wasn't his, Her dad wanted no sight of her. Here we are. A mother should never have to have that kind of conversation with her child. Alex is still dragging this dumb paternity test over my head, and I'm just trying to keep things as normal as can for the kids. It is quite draining. Every day seems like a fresh battle, and I'm simply waiting for the next ludicrous stunt Fiona and he do. One thing is certain, though. I'm not backtracking. If he wishes to present this before courts, sure. Alex proved me right just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, though. Until then, he's not getting away with this stuff. Again. He seems to be naturally gifted in discovering fresh extremes of ridiculousness. This time, it began with a note from Maggie. I should have known better than to believe he would have let things go. She's become my unofficial guide on all things Alex, and to be honest, she's most likely the only person in his life with any sort of common sense. She informed me Alex and Fiona were preparing something huge, something legal, so when I saw her name show up on my phone on a random Tuesday afternoon, I knew it wouldn't be good news. Let me reiterate, Alex, who hardly sees his children, and Fiona, who has zero relationship with them beyond occasionally playing pretend mum, were going to try and take my children away from me by claiming I was the unfit one. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Underneath the laughs, though, lurked a ferocious anger. This was more than just a passing Facebook rage or a weekend trip gone missed. They were targeting my capacity to look after my kids, my children. I informed my lawyer everything Maggie had told me right away. Fortunately, Alex's behavior, from the missed visits to the terrible things he'd said about Lila, had been meticulously recorded by me. Though my attorney informed me I had a good case, it still felt like a gut reversal. Whether strong my case was, the thought that I had to battle for my right to keep my children made me sick. The next few days were a haze. Meetings with my attorney, compiling even more records, all the while attempting to pretend Luke and Lila's life was normal. Though it was eating me within, I wanted them not to feel the stress. Every time I looked at them, I felt this strong impulse to guard them from the storm Alex was building. And then it happened. Alex produced the documentation. He said I lacked emotional stability and could not create a consistent household. Turning the pages, the lies were simply ridiculous. He even dared to claim that I was alienating his children from him, that I was using them as puppets to damage him, as though I were the one missing visits and not picking one of the two. It was unbelievable. My attorney stayed calm, but I was afraid. Courts may be erratic, and the idea of losing even limited custody of my children was intolerable. I knew, though, I had to keep strong. Alex would take advantage of any weakness I displayed a few weeks later on our first court date. I was sick physically as soon as I entered that courtroom. Of course, Alex was there, glitzy and self-satisfied, like if he had already won. Fiona was next to him, perfectly attired as though she were attending a gala rather than a custody conference. You would have thought they were the ideal family attempting to save young Luke from his horrible mother given their behavior. But then something unanticipated occurred. Alex's network of lies started to collapse as the processes continued. Presenting all the data we had, my attorney did a fantastic job showing how erratic Alex had been in the children's life. Then it was my turn to testify. The books, the emails, the missed visits, all presented a rather different picture from the one Alex was trying to sell. Describing how I had been the only caregiver for the children since Alex left, I spoke sincerely and from the heart. I discussed how much I loved them and how I put their needs first over anything else. Alex stammered over his words when it was his turn. I could see the judge listening carefully and absorbing everything. He couldn't keep his story straight, and his lies were more clear the more he spoke. Though his own behavior spoke louder than his words, he painted me as an unsuitable mother. Ultimately, the judge decided in my favor. She awarded Alex just ordinary visitation privileges while turning down his demand for complete custody. Leaving the courthouse, I felt a sense of relief. She even told him to keep paying full child support for both children. I had passed. I had shielded my children. Still, the whole process left a sour taste in my mouth even though I won. Alex had driven me through hell for what? His ego as well? His incapacity to accept the results of his acts? I understood this was not ending. Alex would find another means of complicating my life. For now, though, I had children. That was all that counted. Following the court triumph, things were calm for a little, too subdued. Alex wouldn't simply vanish, but I savored the quiet while it stayed. I concentrated on the children and on reconstructing our lives, but Alex buzzed back into our life with a vengeance, like a relentless mosquito. And this time he really crossed a line. It began with another of Maggie's enigmatic writings. "He is planning something," she cautioned. "Something with Lila." My tummy turned around. Now what could he possibly do? He was paying child support. He had already lost the custody fight, and the paternity test problem seemed to have disappeared. A few days later, my lawyer called. Alex had a motion asking Lila's last name to be altered. I was astonished since he wanted her surname to be unlike Luke's and mine. Whose parent seeks to wipe out the identity of his own daughter? Clearly motivated by Fiona's influence, this was a nasty and vengeful action. She had never really embraced Lila, and this was her means of keeping distance from the family. My attorney told me Alex had little likelihood of success. He changed his name for no good reason, and the judge had already decided in my favor on custody and support. The court date came, and the anxiety was evident, even though I knew it was a long shot. The notion of Lila being singled out and stripped of her name made me coldly afraid. Across from me, Alex and Fiona sat with a smug confidence that made my blood boil. Emphasizing the emotional impact the name change would have on Lila, my attorney fervently opposed the change. They really thought they may win this. Alex struggled through a succession of flimsy justifications when it was his turn to speak, she said, pointing out that he had no reasonable basis for the demand, and that it was obviously driven by malice. Having various last names, he said, avoid confusion and make life easier for all. It was pitiful. Fortunately, the judge saw through his front. She refuted his move, saying it was not in Lila's best interest and that there was no good cause to alter her name. Another win, but at what cost? Alex's unrelenting assaults were draining. I was on edge all the time, poised for the next hit. Despite this, I refused to let Alex break me. The stress was draining, and I worried about the long-term effects this would have on the kids. I would keep fighting for my children, to shield them from his poisonous conduct. Regarding Alex, well, I pity him. They deserved a good and steady life away from the drama and control of their father. His own bitterness and fury consumes him so much that he finds the lovely family he is driving away invisible. He is losing the delight of seeing his children flourish and of being in their daily lives, and ultimately, that is his loss, not theirs.